This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
Hi, I'm Tatum, and today we're chatting about long-term side effects. I've got a friend of mine who charitably calls hers souvenirs. But unlike things that hang out at the back of junk drawers or magnets on the front of the fridge, long-term side effects are often not just physical. They can be mental, emotional, and sometimes even have a financial cost as well. And so I've got two wonderful guests with me today. I'm very excited to talk to both of them. Rime is joining me today. She had breast cancer in her 30s, and those side effects, they just keep on rolling. And right now, I've got Barbara with me over Zoom. Hi, Barbara. You had tongue cancer in your early 30s. Yeah. So tell me, what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed?
Yes, hi Tatum, thank you for having me. So I got diagnosed with a fairly rare cancer. The full technical name is a squamous cell carcinoma, also known as tongue cancer. And at the time, I had just got freshly engaged. I had lost loads of weight. I looked amazing. My business was taking off. I was self-employed, had a limited company in events, and I was just living my best life, to be honest.
Yeah, sounds like it. So I'm so glad you said the name of your cancer, because that is a mouthful, literally. And so when were you diagnosed? How were you diagnosed? Because obviously it sounds like you were feeling okay and life was going well. Like, what brought you into the doctors?
Absolutely. So I discovered a ulcer on my tongue about in October time. And I, honest to God, I have to be honest, I thought it was the wedding flutters. I honestly thought, she's getting cold feet, she's getting stressed. So I didn't think much about it, but I persisted, and I never had an ulcer before. And I kept going to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist recognised me after a while and said, look, you've been back a few times, you need to go and see a dentist. So I went to see the dentist. Dentist thought it was teeth, rubbing against it. So they did their things. They come back in 2 weeks and again. So I saw the dentist a good few times. And then it came to a point where he was really apologetic and said, I am so sorry, but by protocol, I have to send you to the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital, to their oral health department, and they have to take it from there on. And he was really apologetic, and he said, don't worry, it's probably just some sort of viral thing. And I was like, yeah, all right. Went there, saw a junior consultant a couple of times, and then again had a massive apology saying, we're so sorry, but we feel like we need to do a biopsy. Again, it's just protocol because you do not fit like the remit of a tongue cancer patient. So don't worry, it's probably your immune system or something going on, and that will be treatable. So don't worry about it. And I don't actually think the word cancer ever got used. They just said, it's nothing nasty in that sort of sense.
So when they were doing the biopsy, did you think it was just for cancer, or did you think it could have been for anything, like a viral biopsy or something?
Completely honest, I didn't even think of cancer until the consultant who was taking the biopsy said, this definitely isn't cancer. And I think my eyes widened and was like, I didn't realize that was on the menu.
Right.
But then also reassured me, it's like, no, it's definitely not. And actually, because the biopsy to the tongue is not the most pleasant thing to experience, I'm going to be completely honest, but important nonetheless. I was quite cross after, because I thought, man, you just cut into my tongue for no apparent reason. So I went home, and it took me a couple of weeks for that to heal. Had a Christmas, happy as Larry, was a bit irritated by it because eating was a bit difficult. And then walked into the consultant's room on a New Year's Eve, out of all the days.
Wow.
Yeah, and just to put it into context, me and my then fiance, we were totally relaxed. So we basically fell asleep in the waiting room. And when we entered the room, on memory, there's about 6 people in there, which I now know that's never good news. And I sat down, and the the consultant asked me loads of questions. So this was someone else. This is actually the person who ended up looking after me. And he asked me loads of questions. How did you find that? And I honestly thought, oh, they're going to tell me I'm a massive hypochondriac. I was ready. I was like, oh no, they're going to like tell me I'm mad. But no, he just went, you know what? You've done a really good job because you have tongue cancer. You're one in a million of young women who've got tongue cancer. It's incredibly rare in your age group. This is something that affects elderly people. And I was just like, oh, didn't know that was a thing, but thanks.
So I'm trying to imagine what your New Year's Eve was like that night.
Oh, awkward.
Yeah. What did you do?
I went to a party. I went surprise. I said earlier, I'm like an event manager by trade, and I think I just went into emergency department. I was like, yeah, okay, what are we doing? Treating it this way, cool, there's treatment, brilliant, tick, tick, tick. Thank you very much. Can I go to work next week in Germany? No? Oh, okay, I'll cancel that. Never mind, off we go. So there really wasn't that much emotion from my part until it came to the point of breaking the news, and that was when I think it started to sink in.
Yeah.
And pulling people to one side. So at the party we sort of pulled people to one side and then said, look, this has happened, but don't freak out because it's early and it's treatable. So that was difficult.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little bit about your surgery?
Yeah, so my treatment path was a really, really, really big surgery. So they removed about a quarter from my tongue. They then took a part of my arm by the wrist where there basically is no hair. So they took like a piece of skin there with all the sort of fat from underneath, plus an artery. By the way, we've got two, didn't know that, an artery. Then took that to reconstruct my tongue. That artery now goes down the back of my throat. And then took a bit of my leg to patch up my arm.
Wow.
And that took just over 12 hours to get that done. So, it was quite mammoth. I was told before I went under the risk factors, which, I mean, gosh, there was like pages worth. But the main things for me was you might not have the ability to speak. And if you do, you'll have speech impediment and will need quite a lot of rehab. And the other thing was not being able to swallow, which I thought that's pretty basic. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to mentally prepare myself, but woke up after the drugs did their job. I was happy as Larry. I went 1, 2, 3 test. Oh, it's working. And then didn't shut up for 2 days.
What did the doctors and nurses think?
I think the nurses thought I was really entertaining because I just gave them my entire life story and every anecdote I could think about. They were really happy. And for me, I was just, I mean, I had a list and stuff because everything, I mean, I looked awful. I looked like I'd been in a car crash. I mean, my face was swollen and it remained swollen for quite a long time, which is something I didn't really think about either. You know, it took 6 months for my phone to recognize my face. I was like, oh, God.
Yeah, those are things that you don't think about, isn't it?
No.
Wow.
Especially when you don't have a password, you can't remember your password and you're like, oh, God.
And tell me about your arm. Like, did you lose any function in your arm?
Yeah, I did, unfortunately. So this doesn't affect everyone who's got this type of partial glossectomy with free forearm flap, to be technical. But from where mine was taken, and plus my body creates quite a lot of robust scar tissue, it means that I can now no longer fully move my wrist. So, which comes into, when I want to do yoga, I have to do it on my knuckles, basically. I can't use my wrists in that sort of sense. And also I drop a lot of things. If anyone wants to give me a gift, glasses, plates, much appreciated.
Oh, it's such a frustrating thing as well when like you feel like you've lost that strength or that solidity of being able to carry things that you normally would just never have thought twice about. So how did you said like going into it you were quite sort of matter of fact, almost like using your events manager brain to kind of event manage. Did it come to a point where the emotions couldn't be managed in that same way, or that they came up to the fore?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, it's always the small things that get to you, isn't it? And so there were a few occasions. The worst day of my life was a week or so after the surgery. I was admitted home. It was the first 24 hours at home. And then you suddenly realise that your body doesn't function the way it did before, and you're full of painkillers and you can't pass anything. And it basically... a tick box didn't get ticked, so they forgot to give me something to help me go to the toilet. So I ended up giving birth to a watermelon. And that on a Saturday night at 3 a.m. in A&E, which I was mortified because all the clubbers were in there, all the drunkards were in, and I was just, and then my fiance was holding my hand, and I just went, stop, honey, now you turn over, because that's the bit you really don't need to see. Oh. And I had like a rash as well, and it was those little things that just broke me. Yeah, it was, that was crazy. And then actually I did really well for a long time. But then the next thing, which I really didn't see coming. So for 6 months, I was Mrs. Positive, super strong. I'm astonished myself how I dealt with it. I was super present, loved every minute of life, and, got a bit deep about it. Sorry to my mates on this, on that behalf. But about 6 months later, my emotions were completely out of control. And I went through these different cycles of different emotions, which also made me really tired. So fatigue was kicking my backside. But I then later on discovered that actually this was PTSD type symptoms. Mm-hmm. And without getting help, it was just going to escalate into a full-blown PTSD diagnosis, which I think I was lucky to realise that something wasn't right. And I was also lucky that my GP didn't just listen to me, but then fought to get me a place for some triage therapy.
I'm really glad that your GP did that. What were some of the signs of the PTSD?
So it first started, the first times I noticed is I had to go back to the hospital for a checkup, and we ended up going in the room where I had the biopsy. Mm-hmm. And weirdly enough, I mean, next to everything else that happened to me, the biopsy was almost the most traumatic. And every time, I can't go into this room, not even now, 3 years on, because it gives me flashbacks and it basically makes me physically sick. Yeah. I get shakes. But not whilst I'm there. It's usually within like 20 minutes, 30 minutes after, when I get home. And that's when I would start vomiting, shaking, and just feel a bit out of it. And as you can hear, I'm a chatty person. What happens the opposite? I go really quiet. You won't get much out of me. And then I go through a cycle of different emotions, and not to go into too much detail into all of them, but I think the most two extreme ones is the anger, which actually isn't just anger, it's aggression. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't aggression directed at anyone around me, but towards myself. And the worst time we had was when I actually was either hitting myself in the face or knocking my head against the wall, because I was so frustrated. I just couldn't manage my emotion. There was no logic to it. I didn't know why I felt that way. And then the sort of cycle that will come after was extreme sadness. Mm-hmm. And I can't even describe what that sadness feels like when I'm not in it, but it's like the bottom of the pit. It's never going to get better. Yeah. Complete and utter end of life sadness. and nothing makes sense anymore, and there's no point in trying anymore, and completely defeatist. Now with a bit of practice, I know when this does happen, and I can't control it, and sometimes it does happen, that actually the best thing for me is to give into it and feel it and let it pass. But I know that it passes. So I know now if I'm feeling really down and dumps in the dumps, I was like, yeah, it's temporary. It's going to pass. And actually, the faster I can get my mind to accept that, quite often I'll go through those cycles really quickly. And with now, I mean, the last one I had is quite a while ago now. It's probably about 5 months ago. And that was through within a couple of hours. And it was actually only after that I went, oh, I think that was a cycle, wasn't it? So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think PTSD it affects so many in our community, in our Shine community. And I could really understand why that room where you had the biopsy, I think there is something about when you've been told by a doctor, this definitely isn't cancer, and then quite soon after are told that it is, that dichotomy between those two extremes, and also having the rug taken out from underneath you, it's incredibly powerful. And I think it does do something to our minds that is, it's hard to equate. And I can see how when all of that emotion is literally too big for our bodies, it's too big for our processing systems that were currently in place, because we go back to whatever coping systems we had before. And when it's just too big, it comes out in all these different ways, such as, anger, aggression, hurting ourselves, dissociation, and what you said about actually letting yourself experience that deep sadness. Thank you, for sharing that. And knowing that, it sounds like the therapy was that helping with understanding those different stages and being able to chart them.
Massively. Obviously, when we started therapy, we didn't know what the cycles were, but with the help of the counsellor, I was starting to see the patterns and then also see what was setting them off, because it wasn't just the room, it was other things as well. And actually, it's really poignant that you pointed that out about the consultant saying it's definitely not cancer, because we figured out that the triggers are always to do when an untruth was spoken, or I was, or I had like, I always get a lot of new bumps and lumps. That's just, your mouth. Most people don't notice it. But every time someone would say, oh, no, it's definitely not, I completely spiral. And it's pressing those old buttons, and it was basically about reprogramming almost my brain in terms of when you go into fight and flight, to actually read the warning signs better and be able to assess, is this actually a real threat? Was it not? And actually and I've continued. So I had this sort of triage counselling, which happened during the pandemic. So they were able to offer me around, I think it was 4 or 5 months worth of counselling on the NHS. And I felt so great. And I felt I really connected with this counsellor as well, which has never happened before. And I was like, I love this woman. She's amazing. And then, and then the funding runs out. And then they're like, right, you're actually well enough now. And I'm like, well, I can function, but oh my God, you can't just disappear now. That is such a shock to the system. And I also felt like we had so much more work left to do. I hadn't returned to work yet. I hadn't been on the stresses that everyone else experiences, and how was I going to react to that? So I then ended up investing, shall we call it, into private counselling, and I'll continue that until now. And I must admit, I don't think I'm ever going to stop, because we don't actually talk about PTSD anymore. We just talk about life in general and how to cope with it. And right. I think everyone should have a counsellor. That's definitely my top tip.
And I imagine that not being able to work and, you know, that investment in therapy. And I know you mentioned like an investment in going to the gym and, you know, doing other things for your health. Did that have a financial hit?
Massively. I cannot underestimate like how much of a financial hit cancer was for me and my now husband. So first things first, I got diagnosed and it was assumed that that was the end of my business. I was like, hell no, I have built this up. There's no way I'm giving this up so quickly. So I really much took charge of the way I was going to talk about my diagnosis and how I was going to portray it like on LinkedIn and Facebook and all of that. And then the second thing was, so because I'm self-employed, I got something called ESA, which is a benefit. So I basically got 520 quid a month for the last however long. Unfortunately, I didn't take into consideration that we would also have a pandemic in the middle of that.
Yeah.
So I was returning to work in March 2020, so 2 years ago, with the aim to start paying myself on PAYE from the 1st of April again, and had cancelled my benefits because that's what you do. And then when the pandemic hit, that meant that I got no support. And I couldn't go back to the benefits because I no longer had, well, you know, cancer in that sort of sense. And we also weren't eligible to any other benefits because of our household income. So, which actually is a massive, I think it was like 20 quid over the threshold or something like that. So we were just unlucky. And what really got to me through this whole thing was, before I had cancer, it was like drummed into me, yes, be entrepreneurial, go out there, make your luck, you know, and do it. And then as soon as I got cancer, I felt dropped like a hot potato. Like there was no scheme, no structure, no government support there to keep me and my business alive and see me as an investment. It was almost like I'm not worth anything anymore. And that, I felt, was a really hard pill to swallow. There was no one going to come for help. You're on your own.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is like people often sort of imagine that like cancer is the only thing that you have to deal with. But, you know, everyone has had to deal with cancer plus COVID plus whatever else is going on. And it's so much. And to think that you have more expenses because you have to take care of yourself, right? Like you can't just go, oh, I'm just gonna push through, because you actually have to take care of yourself. You're at the least amount of energy when you have to do the most. Yeah. You know, it's so much. And I can see Rime is nodding.
I've been nodding pretty much throughout everything Barbara said, pretty much.
Yes. What has resonated with you?
Oh, and I think this is the great thing about joining organizations like Shine, because then you can connect with people and you can relate with a lot of what they're saying. But for example, finance, I mean, I am bankrupt. I had to, in the end, file for bankruptcy because I've had to be out of work for long periods of times. And it's not just the physical aspect of dealing with cancer. There's also the mental health aspect, which you've pointed out. And I was diagnosed with complex PTSD post breast cancer. But prior to that, I already had mental health issues, which I had to manage myself anyway, such as bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So you can imagine there was a lot to deal with, and I needed a long time to kind of deal with things. But yeah, I could relate with so much of what you were saying, and this is why I'm nodding profusely the whole entire time.
And can you tell me, Rime, a little bit about what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed?
Yeah, so slightly different to Barbara. I think I was quite in a stressful place at the time. There was lots going on, and I wasn't particularly massively getting on very well with my family. I mean, job-wise, I was doing quite well, and I was quite successful, and I was active in various movements, and so I was achieving, but not everything was going brilliantly. And in fact, it was interesting because I went to one of the reason why I joined Shine much later on, in fact, because I didn't engage with it at the beginning, because at the beginning you just deal with the cancer and you're just a robot, and you're not digesting anything that's going on at all whatsoever. But several years later, then it hits you hard. And then that's when I decided to sort of engage with, for example, Shine. And I went to one of the conferences, and there was one session particularly about LGBTQI plus. And that was really interesting because I was having this dilemma with my family where, there's been struggles with my parents to kind of accept me as bisexual. So, I wasn't massively in a happy place, but there were things that were going right for me. But being diagnosed with breast cancer obviously completely disturbed the balance that I built so hard to get to.
Yeah. And where are you now in terms of your surgeries?
So I've been unfortunate that things didn't completely go right from the beginning, and so I'm having to do the reconstruction now, and I've got 2 more operations for my reconstruction, and I've also got an operation upcoming for my lymphedema, because I sadly developed lymphedema post breast cancer. So that's where I'm at the moment. But all the main kind of chemo, radiotherapy, lymph node clearing, that kind of happened. Well, it's nearly coming up to 5 years ago now.
Yeah. But it's such a long time. I think people imagine when you go through breast cancer that there's one big surgery, right, where you get it all done. Not that there's multiple surgeries, not that surgeries can fail and they have to go back, and that it can take years. And, it's like, knowing that you've got another surgery coming up, like, keeps you in a certain place, and then you have to recover and everything else. So, that kind of really, I'm trying to think of the word for it, like, to be able to sustain, right, that energy for that long, for like with years and years, it makes a lot of sense that it does impact our mental health. So what was some of the things for you in terms of the PTSD? What showed up for you?
So there was anger and aggression and lots of mixed emotions, and there were certain, I was self-harming, and that's how I then eventually got diagnosed with complex PTSD. But that's how it kind of manifested eventually. I didn't even know that I did it, in fact. It was others that kind of pointed out, but I kind of used to scratch my face until it bled. And without even realizing I did it, I was doing it at work, and it was so embarrassing, and I was so ashamed. And then, I got a psychotherapist. Sadly, through the NHS, it was impossible to get anything. The waiting times was horrendous. I was very fortunate that my parents were able to kind of help me out with it, because it is quite expensive. It's nearly £100 a session, but worth every penny. I've been doing it for 1.5 years. And as Barbara pointed out, I think I might do it for the rest of my life, because it's kept me going. And it's kind of put a perspective on my life. It's kind of made me accept a lot of things. It's made me manage a lot of things. And understand a lot more about myself. And I've even got to the stage, the same as Barbara, like what I speak of with my therapist now is mostly about general stuff. But obviously we still do some work such as EMDR and things like that. But a lot of the time it's just so nice to be able to kind of express all of the things that you've gone through, because that there are traumatic experiences that you go through. Going through an operation such as, like, the longest operation for me has been 18 hours. It's horrendous. And every operation I've ever had, every time I come out, they always say things like, it hasn't worked out, things went wrong. So, I expect it now. Before I even go in an operation, I'm like, right, yeah, something's going to go wrong now. Which is a really terrible attitude, actually. And I'm learning through therapy to kind of think positively, because things can go right and things pass, like Barbara pointed out earlier. And we kind of have to remind ourselves of that. And yes, things can go wrong numerous times too. We have to kind of face that too. But also good things can happen. And there has been some positive things that have come out of it. Like, the work that I'm doing on myself has been so rewarding, so rewarding. And I advised it to absolutely everyone and anyone to do it, even if they haven't gone through cancer. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there is something called post-traumatic growth. And I think that this is the thing, that when you do get the support, right? Like, when you are in a place that you're able to talk about it, able to recognize it, because I think a lot of people don't, right? Like, they might be dealing with a long-term side effect and be feeling these feelings, but not necessarily putting them together in terms of, like, actually, this is a PTSD, this is an anxiety. And, and then finding out, experiencing it, finding out, and then managing, like, you can get to a better place. But you can't do that all by yourself, right? I think that's the thing. You can't do it in a vacuum. And particularly, I think, with younger people, with older people, they have less amount of time that they're going to deal with these side effects, right? So, younger people, it's like, you have a long time. And to be able to get that help sooner is massive, absolutely massive.
Definitely. I do think we need to invest far more in mental health services. And I've struggled with mental health services from not just because of breast cancer. Prior to breast cancer, I've really struggled through the services. And actually, it's meant that I'm interested in it professionally, and I've done some work around it. And I use my experience, my insight as an expert of my own health to kind of help, services. And I fill in surveys, I'm part of different research, etc. But we do need to invest in mental health. And I think even when you go through a massive physical change or a massive physical illness, if you can manage your mental health, you'll be able to manage your physical health far better.
Yeah.
And this is why I always say, anyone that's just been diagnosed, the first thing I say to them is, like, get a psychotherapist. I made a mistake. That's my big mistake. And I will tell everyone, do not do the same mistake as me. Get it immediately. And then at least you will be able to digest as you go along what you're doing, take stock, manage yourself, absorb things, and you will be able to sustain it and maintain it far better. Rather than dealing with it at a later stage when it's all accumulated and it becomes a bigger problem. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I can so relate to that. I mean, I'm 10 years, right? And I realized...
Congratulations.
Thank you. I realized, actually from doing this podcast, I was doing some research for it. I was doing an episode about guilt and shame. And I didn't realize that I had fallen into shame, like a deep shame, and how much that was affecting everything. And, even this morning, I woke up and I feel kind of guilty that I don't have the same energy as other people my age, that I don't, do as much or accomplish as much. And then I was at work and I was listening to women going through menopause without other health conditions. And I'm seeing so many of the things. Like, I've been postmenopausal with no help for 10 years. Like, yeah, with no HRT, like a brutal, and yeah, that would take your energy, right? And I still have to remind myself of like, it's okay. Your life choices are okay. You know, like you did the best that you could. But this idea that I should be working more, that I should be accomplishing more is still there. And that's at 10 years. So yeah, it takes
I agree with you. It's really difficult. Like, you know what, there's some people which are incredible and I really look up to them. They go through something massive like cancer and then they get inspired and achieve even more and climb mountains and create these incredible social enterprises. And I look up to them and I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. You know, you got this amazing enlightenment and you're doing amazing. But also what I found is the majority of people they're not like that. Those are a minority and they're incredible and, you know, good for them. But also the majority of us are not. Like a lot of people that I've spoken to have taken several steps down from very high powered jobs in HR, in whatever. I've had to take several steps down. So I think part of doing the therapy is actually recognizing my limits and boundaries and kind of working within what I have, because I do have fatigue. I have a lot of side effects. I have a chronic long-term condition which affects me. And so you have to be realistic of the situation that you're living in. You can't compare yourself to what even you used to be, in fact. Or even what your peers are at that moment in time that haven't gone through the same thing as you, because it will destroy you, because that's what it did to me. Because I was like, oh my God, I'm failing at life, like on every possible level. Like, what is going on? I'm bankrupt. I am, you know, I can't keep a job. I don't know what I wanted. You know, I felt lost. For someone that's known exactly what I wanted to do in the past, suddenly, like, everything has gone tits up, basically. But we have to take stock on our situation and actually look at what we're achieving. We're surviving under conditions which are extreme, and we're still trying our best. Like we need to give ourselves credit for those achievements rather than looking at the bigger picture or comparing ourselves to people that have never even gone through anything remotely the same as us. But that's hard. It's hard to accept that because you've lost a part of you. You're accepting something, you're accepting a new you. And that's difficult because you're saying goodbye to the old one and saying, right, hello, I'm having to create a new me. And that's tough. That's hard work. Yeah. That's really, really hard work.
And I think that there is that uncertainty, like how long your side effects are going to go on for, like how long they might be there, and that endurance, that was the word. I mean, it's an incredible level of endurance. Like every scanxiety, every time you're back in the hospital, every new bump, every new side effect, you know, and some side effects roll out of nowhere several years later, and that can be I like what you were saying about credit. I'm all about collecting credits. I used to, when someone used to give me a compliment, I used to be like, oh, I'm going to put that in a box for a rainy day. Like that was my beginning of being able to accept a compliment because, you know, brought up here and my mum is Irish and they're not good at like accepting a compliment. And I was like, but then I lived in America and they are so good at accepting compliments. But yeah, I think that we need to like start to, you know, bring in that credit and hold on to it. And actually bringing Barbara back into the conversation here, you know, one of the things that's so lovely is being able to talk to other people and knowing that you're not alone, feeling like you're failing at life. And of course you're not. You're just dealing with something that's really, really tough. But how have you, because I know you have a very rare cancer, how have you managed to connect with other people?
Yeah, wow. First, not at all. So I didn't have a single peer. Everyone in my waiting room was 70 plus. quite often required assistance from myself because no one else was there to help them. You know, they would wander about and go, no, come on, sit back down, wait for the nurse. Yeah, and it was really hard as well because they would sort of describe to me what the surgery was, and I just couldn't picture it. And I asked my husband to Google it, and he said, no, you don't want to. Don't go down there, Barbara. I don't want to look at it. So I literally went in there blind. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what my face would look like. Didn't know what my arm would look like. So on the back of that, during the pandemic, actually a year ago in 3 days, I hosted a meetup called the Young Tongues, which is now a peer-to-peer support group. And I basically went on Instagram and tried to find as many people with tongue cancer who are our age. So anything between 18, actually we go all the way up to 64, but they're young-hearted 64-year-olds, but predominantly sort of 20s, 30s, 40s. And got them together in a community. We have a WhatsApp group. And it was just beautiful. Heartwarmingly beautiful. It was so amazing when we got the opportunity to meet up in person just a month ago to see other people who have the same scars. And we were literally clambering over each other going, show me your tongue, and show me your arm, and show me your neck scar, and do you have this, do you have that? And, you know, on the chats as well, I was fortunate enough, I dodged radio and chemo. I'm under close surveillance because of it, but I didn't have to go through it. But radiotherapy specifically, head and neck is cruel, but on your tongue is a whole different level. So I've had a bit of external insight into this. But what I found is when we have these chats and the WhatsApp, the amount of support everyone's able to give to each other just by mentioning little tips or mentioning, yeah, that's absolutely normal. That happened to me too. And I wish I had that whilst I was going through treatment. I wish someone could tell me, oh yeah, the arm scar, it's not pretty, but it's all right, sort of thing. Or this is what mine looks like. And I would have been like, oh, okay, that's handy. And just being able to talk with people that I can relate to is massive.
Yeah. And Rime, what was it like? Meeting other people through Shine and that also had lymphedema and also went through breast cancer?
I think it's so nice to be able to connect with people that just understand what you're going through. And they would always say the right things. They just know the right thing to say because they've gone through it themselves. So, it's really empowering, and it kind of reassures you, and you get great advice, great tips. So, but again, like Barbara, I didn't do it right at the beginning, because I was just, first of all, I think I was in denial. I was just like, and first of all, the doctor said to me, you've got an easy cancer, it's I know like how can you say that? But yeah, it's really interesting. Barbara reminded me earlier when the doctor said to her about, like, that's definitely not cancer. Like, they can't say things like that. But I had a doctor say, well, it's fine, it's an easy cancer, so you'll get through it, no problems. But actually turns out that I had lots of problems. But I just wished, like Barbara said earlier, was the fact I didn't join right at the beginning, because I was just so busy just trying to get on with it. And maybe I was in a little bit denial to really wanting to accept I was part of the cancer people. Right. I kind of wanted to detach myself from it, if that made any sense. Yeah. So it's
the club no one wants to be a part of.
Well, no, exactly.
Yeah, but once you're in, we're really cool.
I know. So I would highly recommend it for anyone to start it early, because I wish I did. And then I would have been reassured a little bit more about certain things that went wrong. And because then later on, I found out lots of people had lots of difficulties, same as me, and developed lymphedema. So now I'm in another group. Through Shine, I got to join another group that's specifically for lymphedema. And that, again, is super helpful. The tips that you get from there, it's incredible. So, yeah, highly recommend it for anyone to kind of join those support groups, peer support groups.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely to hear. And Barbara, you went on the Great Escape, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. That was a change. I was on the last one just before we all locked down.
Right. And did going on that with Shine, did that kind of inspire your young tongues?
I guess so, yes. I think what it really inspired me is to seek out other people like me, because it was the first time I say it like that. It was the first time I met people who have gone through cancer and got that. But then there was still a bit of difference because my cancer was so weird, because everyone's looking at me going like, oh my God, that surgery sounds awful. And I'm going like, oh my God, your chemo sounds awful, And I made some really great friends, and it was an amazing time, and I learned so much. So we'll most definitely, once they come back online again, or shall we say into the real world as well, go for the escapes. They're amazing.
Fabulous. Oh, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing. And yeah, I think all round, we need to give ourselves, I don't know, awards, sashes, tiaras. I think a whole list of accomplishments would be fabulous, because it's a serious level of endurance dealing with long-term side effects. And I'm really glad that you've both found different ways, found different support, and found other people that can also kind of normalize the experience, right?
Absolutely.
As shitty as it is, other people that just get it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. And a massive thank you, as always, to Radio Facilities, who record and sponsor us at Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show. And if you've liked this episode, there are loads of others, check them out. But please do rate and subscribe, because it helps other people find us. So till next time, bye.